I was talking to another person who said they think humans, uh, for the welfare of the rest of life on planet Earth, that humans probably need to go. And and I disagreed. I not that that's not true. I do think if humans left, the rest of life on Earth would benefit for sure. Um, I mean, that's a non-arguable statement. But her argument was that humans are not capable of living in a harmony with life. And I challenged that. I think that we are, only because what I'm experiencing, from somatic experiencing, from coming into the nervous system. But the further I come into my body and into my nervous system, the closer I start connecting to life in the natural world, and the further I start getting away from all of the things I was raised with: capitalism, patriarchy, racism. Um, they're all tied up. And any hint of trying to work with capitalism, with patriarchy, oh, we need oil. We can't transition away from that too fast. We need economics and jobs. I'm finding that like it all sounds hollow to me. It rings hollow. It's like, no, folks, this is the problem. And so I start to think that it's quite a radical solution. I don't think we are going to get ourselves out of this in an incremental, evolved, skillful way. I actually feel like from my body, I feel like this is going to have to be some pretty radical shift. And at the same time, I've worked with, been part of multiple indigenous communities, communities of color, oppressed communities through my whole life. I mean, that's where I've done most of my learning and growing. And always in those communities, I hear this long-term perspective on life. I remember one time I
Mm.
was driving down with a Anishinaabe medicine man down to Washington, D.C. We were doing taking an AIDS quilt panel to the last full showing of the AIDS quilt back in 93 or 4. And we were taking a panel for Native Americans who had died of AIDS. And as we were driving down, I remember I was sitting in the front seat, he was driving, and I tapped the plastic dash of this van that we were in. And I said, "This is the problem. This van, all this pollution." This was over 30 years ago. I was like, this is terrible. This is destroying life. This plastic, this oil, this fossil fuel stuff. And his response was, this all came from the earth. This is all part of the earth." He just had a very different relational perspective of things, where I was feeling very black and white. This is bad. This is not good. This is us and them. Even though I started talking about that earlier, there is a shift. There is this, like, I can imagine now what he was talking about
Mhm.
somatically. People who have been violently oppressed for a long time and have continued to survive and experience life, I think they have a very different perspective than me as a white guy who's like lived with privilege my whole life and been taught this dualistic good, bad, now or nothing. Anyway, I don't even know where I was going with all that.
Well, I think that part of what you're talking about, the us versus them. A few years ago, we went to see Robert Sapolsky talk about the biology of good and evil. That's how it was proposed, because I was on a list of clergy um, that I actually don't even remember signing up for, since I became an online reverend to marry you, to your wife.
Yeah.
And so I got this thing about, hey, they're doing this biology of good and evil talk by Robert Sapolsky. My whole family's big fans. We all took the day off. We went down, and it was being held at a temple in Seattle, a synagogue. And it was really a great talk, 90 minutes long. And he was talking about evolutionary biology. And he would say, like, hey, here's a person holding a gun and they shoot this other person who they perceive as a threat. When was that decision made? And he says, 1 minute before, this is what was happening. 10 minutes before, an hour before, 24 hours before. How is his system being set up and conditioned to be able to pull that trigger? And he goes through, all the way back into a million years ago. And, he's like doing evolution backwards to get to how this person came to this point where he perceives some threat, pulls a gun out and shoots somebody. So ultimately he was, his perspective as a scientist is that there's no such thing as free will. And we're sitting in the middle of some weekday, a work day for most people. We're sitting in this, crowd of clergy and a bunch of older Jewish people who came to listen, and everybody, you could hear the groans and the protests rising. And Sapolsky addressed that too, about, okay, look, there is free will in an essence, but not really as far as like what I'm talking about here with evolutionary biology. Is like, you can still make decisions. I've been talking for 90 minutes. How many of you need to pee? And everybody holds their hands up. He says, but how many of you are peeing right now? And without even a split second going by, my son holds his hand up. I started laughing so hard. And Sapolsky actually snorted. And he points at Ben and he's like, you're a troublemaker. It was really quite funny. Anyway, that, I've never been prouder. but seriously.
Well, this is the nervous system, right?
Right. But the point, I actually told a story instead of going into my point. I lost my point. My point was, he talked about this helicopter pilot from Vietnam era, fully conditioned his whole career to I'm U.S. military, I am us, they are them, right? And he's flying low level over My Lai as a massacre is happening. He sees what's happening. And he lands his gunship down between advancing soldiers who are raping and murdering these villagers who have no weapons. And he tells them, like, look, if you take another step forward, we're going to start opening fire on you. And in the biology, this neurology, where all these decisions were taking place, is very plastic on the us versus them, right? He'd been conditioned his whole life that we're the good guys. But he saw something that really upset something deep in him. And he reacted the way that I hope I would react in that moment. And he felt common cause with the victims of our imperial violence in the moment, with impunity, right? Like, nobody paid the price for this horrible catastrophe. And this guy, for taking his stand, he got death threats for 30 years. So his name was Hugh Thompson, I think. And it was like, that has stuck with me, that story. And he wrote about that in his book, Behave. Sapolsky was on a book tour when he did this talk. And he talked about another one, which you and I have talked about before, which was, during World War I, when the troops in the trenches on the Western Front, who were killing each other every day, had the Christmas truce, to drag the bodies of their fallen comrades. And the truce, it turned out it was a real truce. Nobody was shooting at anybody. And actually some of the Germans helped drag some of the English across back to, the English side and vice versa. And they started talking to each other. And it was Christmas Eve and they started sharing some food. And the us versus them transitioned over this period of time. I think it was like, 10 days or 2 weeks? They couldn't get them to start killing each other again. And then they were getting basically death threats from their own generals. You start shooting or you're going to get hung or, executed. And then they were shooting over each other's heads. They started shooting, but they weren't shooting at each other. But the us versus them are those guys that put us here to kill each other versus us. Like, why do we hate each other? We're told to. We were propagandized. It was that whole Yeah. Anyway,
What's
that's the part of it. That's the part that gives me hope, is that there is this us versus them, definitely. And it's a way that we orient to each other. How do I feel like I'm safe in my group? Do I need to change groups? All the other stuff. And do I really care about justice, or am I more about my group right or wrong?
Yeah. So this is where I'm going to invite something deeper to me. I don't give a fuck about justice in terms of whatever that is, right? Justice to me is a cognitive term that anything that's up in here can be manipulated quite easily, right? So to me, justice, this is the difference. It's not about justice. It's not about right and wrong. And what and again, this is, I don't know, I'm curious. I'm not arguing from gonna die on the hill with this one. I don't know. But to me, the orientation, the us and them, back to what I was saying earlier, my sense is it's about life. Are we, I'm going to take the term pro-life, right? Are we defenders of life more than justice, more than right and wrong, more than my group and your group? Do I defend life? And to me, that's kind of where I believe that if we don't get to that level in our bodies and our nervous systems, because that's what our evolutionary biology that Sapolsky was talking about, to me, I'll extrapolate that into, survival in life. And then we have to get very clear on what that means. What am I really fighting for? So I was thinking about this earlier, maybe people politically to the quote unquote right, whatever the hell that means, or conservative or whatever, they're like, yeah, that's why we're fighting. That's why we're killing Iranians, because we're pro-life, or that's why we're going after Democrats because they want to murder babies or whatever it is, right? And there's something maybe even the immigrants. The immigrants are killing us. They're eating the dogs and the cats. We're defending life. I mean, even my definition of, who's on the side of life can be twisted around, right? Like, I am not interested in right, wrong, justice, injustice, good, bad. Although I go there a lot, probably more than most people. But it has got to be something that lands in my body. And when I see people killing each other or killing innocent people, it drives me crazy, right?
Yeah.
But I would bet probably a lot of people on the political spectrum that I don't identify with would probably be saying that's why they're going crazy and willing to kill Democrats, because Democrats are inviting murderers into the country to kill them, So I imagine it gets into some bizarre, weird evolutionary biology survival thing there too. I don't know. Now I just kind of totally blew apart my own argument that I felt so strong about.
I knew if I waited long enough, this is actually, we need to come up with a safe word for this. I could drop it as an Easter egg earlier in the conversation. Watch, we'll just give John enough rope to hang himself with. Give him enough time. His arguments get circular at some point.
Fuck, you're the enemy, man.
I'm the enemy. I'm the one.
You know what I do know?
What do you know, man?
After we meet today, I'm going skiing.
Ooh, okay then. Cool.
So while the world's blowing itself up and
you're going to be partaking in an activity that helps you stay regulated.
And that's high carbon footprint that's helping me stay regulated, but not doing the world any. But I am carpooling there, so.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. What's happening internally? Like, not thoughts, just.
I was just wondering about that myself. I was curious, like, how am I doing now? I'm feeling a little bit less owned by my nervous system in the moment. I haven't come into like some kind of a ventral vagal state. And that's some feedback I've gotten from other episodes. Like, you guys use this jargon, and sometimes you might need to like put a little definition in for people.
Fuck that. They should do the work.
Well, actually, I'm going to ask you, John. Let's talk about a ventral vagal state. What does that mean? Because people are like, what's that?
Are you asking me?
I am. Let's hear it.
Well, again, the polyvagal theory has, as I understand it, has 3 states in the nervous system through the vagus nerve, basically, the way the vagus nerve impacts our organism. And the ventral vagal is quite frequently, it's a parasympathetic state, so it's a braking system. I think of it as a gentle braking system in our nervous system. So the sympathetic is like the gas pedal. So fight, flight, panic, rage, stoke would be a sympathetic state. High
Mm-hmm.
out my pens.
Or throw up your diagram you've been working on.
I think I'll just bring the pens now for simplicity's sake. The yellow is kind of like it goes up and down, right? It's like a
Mm-hmm.
equalizer. And in our system, this is the
This is a
gas
bar
pedal.
graph. Yeah.
This is like a bar graph. So, when we wake up, we have to have a little sympathetic, a little gas pedal to go down the hall, to pee, wake
Mm-hmm.
up. When we're sleeping, that should be pretty low. This is shutdown. This is dorsal vagal. So this is an emergency brake. Polyvagal theory says this is fully developed at birth. So if there's too much gas pedal, too much voltage, too much amperage going through our body, we're raging or we're panicking, quite frequently the fuse breaker will come on. It'll blow the system and this will go down, ideally. And now we're in a parasympathetic. The fuse came on. It keeps us from burning our system out. And this allows us to eat, to sleep. Another parasympathetic braking system is the ventral vagal, the green. And if that comes on, that means we're connected, feeling safe, feeling present, compassionate, curious. Now, again, they're levels. They're not all or nothing. There's different variations. So right now, from where you and I started this morning, I am feeling a little more, we started talking about something. You were much more in a sympathetic
Yeah.
state,
High activation.
high activation. And as we talk, it seems to me like that's gone down, not to nothing, but
I would agree.
midterm.
But I would say that the green has come up quite a bit.
Yeah, probably not fully, but
no, I would say it's eclipsing. Yeah, I'm definitely
Okay.
feeling more connected.
Okay. So maybe something like that.
Yeah.
So this
yeah,
would be your ventral vagal. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm feeling a little somewhat ventral, more ventral than I was, but not like in the full on ventral vagal, warm, fuzzy feeling. You know what I mean?
Well, we shouldn't. Probably that would be a very hard state to achieve at any point during what's happening in
This
the world.
discussion.
Or what's happening in the world. There's probably going to be a degree, a level of that sympathetic on. That's not going to go away in the world we live in now. It shouldn't.
Well, I think that, I don't know. It really depends on what kind of work you're doing, or what kind of interactions you're having. I think for periods it might get turned off. It might not necessarily be in a bliss bypass way, just more of a.
Well, the sympathetic's not all bad, right? Like it's.
Well, I agree. I know that none of them are good or bad. I'm just talking about like the things that people want to feel. Like, I want to feel safe. I want to feel loved. I want to feel connected. Well,
It's not only that
Yeah.
we want to. We like that's part of our.
It's a survival drive. It's a primary survival drive. Is connection.
Connection is as well. It's not as important as fight. I think it's secondary to fight or threat detection. If we miss a threat, we're gonna die, right? Like,
Right.
we very well could. If we miss a connection, we probably aren't going to die. It's not an immediate threat. So I think the prioritization of threat detection is necessary in our organism. And I think connection as equally or more important to our survival than threat detection. I just think the threat detection is prioritized because of the immediacy.
If we're dealing with large threats on our own, we're less likely to survive. If we're connected with others and we organize or we just react together against the threat, we're much more likely to survive. Whether that threat is climate catastrophe or some incursion into our village.
Or the primacy. You know what? I'm actually going to circular again. The primacy of connection when we're born. It doesn't matter if our nervous system's detecting threat or not. If we're not connected and don't have an attachment, we can't, if we're a little baby lying there, like we often are, and we're screaming because we have a dirty diaper or we're hungry or there's a threat, we can't run away. We can't protect ourselves. We can't change our diaper. We can't feed ourselves. And so that primacy of connection and attachment is really, really important for survival, not even just for,
not just for development.
Yeah, we're not talking development and nice feelings,
right,
or what we want. It's a survival.
It's also the training for connection. If you're not trained to connect, you grow up antisocial or shut down and you don't have the capacity or ability. It's kind of like turning off that evolutionary advantage, right? But for whatever reason, the way our society the way society has evolved to what it is now, it seems to reward sociopaths and psychopaths.
Well, look at the basic, and this can be triggering. Here's a trigger. Not that anything else we have talked about isn't, but this is a trigger warning. This idea of letting babies cry it out in bed. Bring the pens back out, and I think this is a root, one of many roots, but one of them. The baby is crying, they're screaming, their nervous system's in a high sympathetic state. They have a wet diaper, a shitty diaper, they're hungry, they're scared. We put them in a bedroom next to us in a crib. Their nervous systems, our nervous systems, the baby doesn't know they're safe in a house. They just know they're alone. And their nervous system says, this isn't good. A coyote could come by and pluck me out, or an enemy could come grab me. The nervous system goes, this isn't good to be a baby and be alone. I can't protect myself. The baby doesn't have a developed cognitive sense that, oh, I'm in a crib, my parents are in the room next door, I'm in a house, there's an alarm. The baby's nervous system does not know that. So their nervous system's freaking out. And what do? When Ziggy was a baby, we read this book that was like, you have to let the baby cry it out. You can't give in to the baby. You can't allow the baby to be the center of the family. I remember going, what in the hell is this crazy shit? And I didn't know anything about the nervous system. So babies screaming.
And it's also telling you to override your high compassion as a parent.
Or
override that.
Or ride my evolutionary, not even compassion as a parent, my evolutionary biology to propagate and keep the species alive, to survive. So what happens? Baby cries. No one responds. What baby's looking for evolutionarily is that somebody comes in and goes, oh, baby, here, come in with us, sleep with us. Baby goes down. Now baby starts to develop some ventral connection. Baby's between two parents. Baby's nursing and making eye contact. Now they're developing the ventral vagal connected state. That's not what we're taught in North America, right? Indigenous communities do that. They sleep with the baby.
So keep going. So what is, take us to that next step.
So we let the baby cry it out. Yeah. Baby screaming. There's so much amperage going through the baby's nervous system. They're freaking out. But guess what comes on? Fuse breaker goes off because baby's going to die if they stay in this state. They won't digest. They won't be able to sleep. They'll actually, their heart will blow up, whatever it is, right? Parasympathetic shutdown goes on. Gas pedal goes down. Now baby goes to sleep. But baby's in a shutdown, not in a connected state, but in a disconnected shutdown state.
Like dissociation.
Well, yeah, dissociation's a
Maybe.
large, that's maybe an extreme, but maybe they're not, all the way to dissociation or prepared for death. But the fuse came on. Now baby can go to sleep. And what do parents in the next room go? This really does work, this cry it out. Because baby's sleeping now, and we can sleep, and now we don't have to get stressed out and all pissed off because baby's screaming all night and keeping me up.
Mm-hmm.
And so baby just learns that this never comes online. Or we even, when a baby or a child, let's say a 2-year-old's like, no, I don't want to. You go to your room. Baby's like this, I don't want to, throwing a tantrum. Good Americans, what we do, you punish them. You increase the stress, or you isolate them. Or punish them. Now you get both of these stuck on. This is a bad state. None of the other states are bad. This one is. That's why I'll call that one bad. The gas pedal to the floor and the brake to the floor.
Revving the engine up, not going anywhere.
Not going
anywhere. High metabolic cost state. A very high metabolic cost state.
There.
It's a hard one. It's a hard state to have patterned and ingrained. A necessary state in certain circumstances for survival, but also leads to that whole global high intensity activation pattern that people can get stuck in, where they're all the way up until they burn out, until metabolic collapse happens, and then they crash. And once they're rested, they don't come back up into what we would call a nice place where you're open for connection. They jump right back up into fight or flight until they burn out, and then they crash, and they're just up and they're down, and they're not like, yeah, I'm working with, I'm elevated when I need to be. I don't need to be. I'm fine. Well, that was a good explanation. I've always admired your ability to talk about that.
Well, I have to give credit to Burns Galloway.
I was going to say Burns Galloway would be very proud of you.
Well, maybe.
I don't know. Let's not go that far.
It depends.
Burns is a puzzle. No.
Anybody who knows Burns would say, he might say it depends. It's close, but not quite.
Proud. I wouldn't say proud of John Mayer.
But it lands, right? It lands.
Yeah, it does. It works. I think it's something that a lot of people can follow, especially with the visual. So if you're listening, if we do put this out and you're listening to it, I would recommend you seek this.